A lot of us thought that ETH was a scam. This is dumb. I didn't know what to do at the time. I had accumulated Bitcoin. It was really weird, right? Because Bitcoin was worth, 120 to 450 or something like that, I think. So I wasn't making enough to pay the bills. And so that's kind of when I went down the rabbit hole. I could not believe what I was seeing. And I was like, how is this possible? Like, there's no way. Yeah. And that was the end of Satoshi.
Hey everyone, welcome to Crypto Tips. My name is Toby, obviously. This is Kyle Chasse. He's been around this space since 2012, so definitely an OG. Kyle, tell us how you got involved with crypto.
Yeah, thanks, Toby, for having me, and hello, audience. I think we met one time before at a conference a long time ago. I don't remember where it was, but it was like I think it was
Steam Fest, right?
Which one?
It's Steam Fest in Lisbon.
Maybe. Sounds familiar, but I'm not sure. I know it was briefly a while back, but anyway, I got into it. I don't know. I'm assuming that most other people who were involved. So like, if you got involved in 2012 or 2013, like you were either like a coder and like a cypherpunk and working on something, or you were probably looking around on the dark web on like Silk Road, or maybe you were just super into like, something. I don't know. I was a guy who was on Silk Road who discovered it through Silk Road. And at the time, it wasn't really just Bitcoin. That like the Silk Road was fascinating, right? I was like, what the hell is this thing? Like, that's the first time I heard of the dark web, the first time I heard of Silk Road, the first time I heard of Bitcoin, and I could not believe what I was seeing. Like, I couldn't believe it. It was just like, it was like unbelievable. You're going to like Amazon, but you can go buy like drugs or like credit card things or like all the, and I was like, how is this possible? Like, there's no way. And then that's what allowed me to learn about Bitcoin. And that though wasn't what took me down the rabbit hole necessarily. It was really not until a little bit later when I found out that that WikiLeaks was using it to accept donations for a while, when every other centralized, payment rail had shut them out. And I was like a really big advocate for what WikiLeaks was doing. That was the aha moment to me where I was like, wow, like if this is something that can be used in a situation like that, that's got to be really powerful. And so that's kind of when I went down the rabbit hole.
So like back during WikiLeaks, I think, isn't that when Satoshi kind of left the scene, when WikiLeaks started people started giving donations in Bitcoin there?
Yeah, and I don't think it was like, I don't think that was, well, it actually was pretty correlated because essentially the government, like the CIA or FBI or whatever, would have had no interest if it wasn't for WikiLeaks, right? That's what really got it was Hal Finney, I think, or Peter Todd or something. One of the two guys, I forget, who went and wrote Satoshi and said, "Hey, I'm actually going to go see the FBI or CIA tomorrow or something." And then
yeah, I think it was somebody. Yeah, it was. Yeah, and then that's when he's like, "Oh, see you later."
Adam Back or one of these guys. I mean, maybe it's Adam Back. I don't remember. It was one of the earliest guys. Yeah, or Gavin. Maybe it was Gavin. Yeah. And yeah, and that was the end of Satoshi. He was like, he's out. So yeah, and then I started going to, conferences and stuff like that too, back in the early days, 2013, 14. I remember going to London. We had a Bitcoin meetup. Roger Ver was like the only speaker. There was a couple like small ones, but it was a half-day event at a library in London, and Ledger was there with their little test proof of concept kind of devices. They hadn't even had a finalized product. Yeah. And I just remember there's really exciting times, and I can tell when I watch you and Heidi that like there's a deep passion for, like you guys felt, you and Heidi are probably the two people that have YouTube channels that are still really, really active. Like, I don't know if Andreas Antonopoulos is still making videos, but like he was one of the best people back in the day. Yeah. But today, like, I think that I can still really tell that you guys have a passion for like what this industry was started for, which is like, hey, we're supposed to be focused on decentralization. What happened to that, And I think everyone got dollar signs in their eyes, and that I saw that happen in 2017. Before then, it was a lot of before 2017. It was really, that was not the conversation, right? It was building. Yeah.
That was pretty fun. And so wait, back in, I think is I read your what you've done in 2013 is right. You created a lottery or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. So I was, so, you know,
Yeah.
I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and I'm just like, you know, I was filling up a tank of gas at the gas station, and there was, you know, on the radio, it was like, you know, oh yeah, we have the state lottery. I forget if I was in Chicago or California at the time. I remember, you know, it's $325 million or something. I was like, damn, that's a lot of money for a lottery for a state. And I was like, man, imagine if like all of the United States had one mega lottery of the United States, right? And then I was like, man, I think every other country in the world has a lottery, and like people play these things. Imagine if there was a one gigantic global lottery. That could be huge. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, and nobody's regulating or monitoring Bitcoin right now, but it's also a currency, so let's just use that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I was a little optimistic on the timeline of adoption, extremely optimistic. But it was also my first time like building anything. I'm not a developer myself, but I hired an Indian development company, and it took a long time to build this thing. But it was an exact replica of the California State Lottery. The front end looked exactly the same. The way the rules worked almost exactly the same. But instead of having to win 6 numbers, you only had to win 5 numbers.
Okay.
It was great. It was really fun. It got me into the community. I had my thread on Bitcoin Talk forum, and I got to go to conferences and meet people, and like that's what kind of got me into the whole thing.
That's nice. How did you get the word out?
You know, through the Bitcoin Talk forum, some advertising on Facebook. You know, I ran it for about 70 or so drawings. There was 2 drawings a week, so I went for 35 weeks or something like that once it was live.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work because I did it live, right? I don't want people to think I was in any way like being, you know, like manipulating this thing. And so, you know, I shot it one live stream. I was pseudonymous, so you never saw my face. But I bought one of those machines from China that spin the balls around, and they, you know, one at a time that comes down the chute, and I had like a little close-up cam and a wide cam. And what I did was before, like at the start of every drawing, I would zoom in on the tablet that I had next to the lottery machine, and I would refresh like timeanddate.com. And I said that I was in Costa Rica because it couldn't be in the United States. I didn't want to be in this. So I had my VPN saying Costa Rica, and I say, okay, in Costa Rica, you could say time and date. And then also next to that, I open the tab next to it, and I opened like blockchain.info or whatever, or Bitstamp or whatever to show you the price of Bitcoin at the time. So you couldn't fudge with it. And then people on Bitcoin Talk forum, look, it wasn't the reason I eventually went into another project and stopped doing the lottery was because it wasn't highly profitable. I was making some Bitcoin, but Bitcoin was worth, you know, 120 to 450 or something like that, I think, you know, while I was doing that lottery. So I wasn't making enough to pay the bills, if you will. So I stopped and did something else at the time. So, but I did accumulate some Bitcoin at the time.
Well, that's good. That's really cool. And then so the next year, I went through your timeline. So the next year you found Ethereum, and you were tell us about that. I want to know how you found Ethereum.
So I wasn't part of Ethereum, but we were part of a project called Pythia. And what Pythia was doing was it was building. So it was building. Actually, the Pythia was the company, and then they were building something called credits. And it was so what we wanted to do was this was before Ethereum launched, and so we were trying to build a smart contract blockchain that had private and public interoperability, like essentially thinking all the way ahead to what you're trying to do today, where you have one public chain where people could ride on the public chain and work and build on it, and if they didn't care about having privacy or whatever, but then private companies and corporations, whatever, could build like essentially like what Polkadot has or something, like these kind of other chains where they could be private and they could submit public data that could be verified on chain to the private chains. So I actually met this team at it was like an affiliate conference, and then it was a gaming conference, so they could, you know, like casino gaming, and then a huge mega thing in London or something like that. In the corner, it would have taken up less than 1% of the floor space at the event. There was like they pulled in like a little trailer, and that was like where the crypto guys were. And some guys presented on stage. They said, "Hey, we're building this like new layer 1 blockchain. we need all the help we can get. And I was like, I'll join your team, and I don't want any money. Like, I just want to be part of this, you know? And so, so I just joined, and that we raised some money, and it didn't work. That didn't work out. So that was that. And then that was the end of, so that led me on to the end of 2015. And then I didn't know what to do at the time. I had accumulated Bitcoin. It was really weird, right? Because most people, when they become financially free, it's because they worked and they did something and then they achieved. Like for me, I sold a business in 2013 for Bitcoin. Well, I sold it for cash, but then bought Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And then it just so happened that all the other businesses that I failed as an entrepreneur never really actually ended up costing me money, but it was that one thing that I sold, some essentially like my brand of a company in 2013, bought Bitcoin. By that time that layer one had failed, my Bitcoin was worth enough, and I knew that it would continue to appreciate in the future, that I knew at that point, this is so weird. Like I know that I'm financially good for the rest of my life. And that was an interesting time in my life. So I just, you know, I took up photography and was trying to figure out what to do with my life at that point.
So then you got into the ICO, and what was it like? One Bitcoin was 2,000 ETH, right?
Something like that. Yeah. But I didn't go into the Ethereum ICO. I thought like I was, like, you know, if you were hardcore into Bitcoin back then, like I think a lot of us thought that ETH was a scam. I was like, this is dumb. I didn't understand. I didn't know what smart contracts were. I didn't really pay much attention. And then I had accumulated quite a bit of Bitcoin, and how I survived at the time as someone who's an entrepreneur is I would just sell some Bitcoin from time to time to pay for rent, to pay for things, to do whatever, right? And so I was using localbitcoins.com at the time. So people would come by my house, you know, you meet people on the streets and you sell. And so some guy came over one time, super panic, and like to buy Bitcoin from me. And he was telling me that he wanted to buy Bitcoin so that he can sell it for ETH. I'm like, what do you want to buy? Why do you want to buy ETH so bad for? He's like, oh man, like we're building this really cool technology. It's like smart home technology with decentralized like locks and stuff like that. And you can use smart contract. And so he took time to like tell me about why he was so excited to build on Ethereum. And then I was like, okay, I get this now. It's so interesting. So the time I came into Ethereum was, I think, around like $2 or something like that.
Yeah. It's funny. Like for me, like I was going surfing in my, I was at Nazare, and I caught a wave, lost my board, went in, and then my friends like on the beach, and I needed to get another board. And he was kind of like a coder developer guy. And so we're driving back to my place to get another surfboard. I'm like, hey, what's your favorite crypto? And he's like, I think it's ETH. I'm like, really? I'm gonna have to look into that. So back then it was 70 cents, but I'm like, oh, that's pretty expensive, because back then that was really expensive for like a coin. You know what I mean? That wasn't Bitcoin. I'm like, I'll put a little bit in. But that was so yeah,
wow,
it's really interesting.
You're at Nazare, huh?
Yeah.
Wow,
So,
man. What was the biggest wave you caught that day? Do you know?
I mean, wasn't that big. I mean,
Okay.
compared to how big the other days are, but I've essentially gotten most of these surfers into crypto. So, which is nice to.
Have they taken you out to lunch at least?
Not yet. Oh, actually a couple of photographer guys are really happy about that. But anyways, back to you. So do you go surfing at all, or are you a surfer?
No, like, so I grew up in California, and and so when it came down to like board sports, like to longboard on skates, you know, skateboard and snowboarding, loves, you know, grew up snowboarding since I was 2, well, skiing and then switched to snowboarding. My parents both surfed when I was a kid, and I tried it. Man, you know, I don't know what it was. Like, it's a hard sport to learn, you know, and I was also quite overweight as a kid. So like putting that wetsuit on was like really struggling, and then just got that. So I didn't really pick it up. I didn't pick up surfing. No.
But you picked up Bitcoin, so that's good.
Yeah, at least that. Yeah.
That paid off, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. Yeah, I guess it's really hard to do. I don't know, because I started so young, but from what I hear, it's like ridiculously hard to do. But not to persuade anybody. Huh?
The learning curve is crazy with surfing. I mean, on snowboarding, like it's painful. It's really painful for like a day, but then when it clicks, it clicks, and then you're good, right? You go from like complete noob to like intermediate in a day and a half or something like that, right? Learning curve is great, not like surfing.
No, definitely not. Nice, man. Okay, well, hey, let's go into what we're experiencing like over the past, like since 2020, like with, celebrities, that people are looking up to, and governments getting involved and stuff. What are your thoughts on all of this? Like, do you think that, let me ask you this, what are the positives and negatives of what we're seeing today with like governments getting involved compared to where the initial, ideology was when we first got back, or when we first got into crypto?
Well, the funny thing is, so in 2013, like when after reading the Bitcoin white paper for like 30 times or something, really trying to understand it because it was complete Chinese to me at first. And then seeing different WikiLeaks, like I was pretty certain by then that it was not going away. And at the very least, because remember back then we also thought it was anonymous, right? We also thought it was untraceable. Like we didn't know there was going to be like these on-chain tracking companies and do all this. So at that time, I believed that at the very least, Bitcoin was always going to be used for like cartels and money laundering and like all that stuff. So I thought there'd always be a use case for it, and I thought that use case would be adopted and around, at the very least. But then I would say and then around probably 2015 or something like that, I would say at that point, I started getting a little bit more interested in economics and then like studying Ray Dalio stuff and kind of like the, changing of world currencies and fiat currencies and these kind of things. And I actually did a lot of that work before I discovered Bitcoin too. That's kind of what captivated me as well, was just kind of understanding, also being someone who another reason Bitcoin was really interesting to me is because, and why I decided to get into the industry and build and be part of it, was because I grew up watching kind of like conspiracy theory videos, Zeitgeist, 9/11, Federal Reserve, all these things, right? And so it just made sense. And like being an American, I was like, dude, this is ridiculous. I've never voted in my life, right? Just seems ridiculous. I live in California, so why I'm from there. So why would I go vote so I can slap a sticker on my chest and go around and say, look, I voted? Like, it doesn't matter. It's always a blue state. Plus, what I had seen, nothing ever changed. So Bitcoin was the first time that something showed me that something big might change. And then as I started understanding global politics and traveling more, so from 2015, I would say I was about 60% sure that it might become a world reserve currency. Every year subsequently, I think that my confidence increased by about 10%. Today, I'm like 100% sure, 99% sure that it will be a world reserve currency. And I think that is, that's different than like a strategic reserve. Like, I think that people are hesitant to say it'll be a world reserve currency because that is threatening. That is intimidating to governments. It's not palatable, right? People can look at Bitcoin as a digital gold. But I do think that once it finds global reserve status, then it becomes easier to spend. Maybe Lightning Network becomes more interesting at that point because Bitcoin will be less volatile, right? So we're not going to bank on Bitcoin's appreciation in price once it stabilizes at some point. I don't know what that dollar value will be. So back to your question about governments getting involved, it was always kind of part of the thing. And that's why I was just kind of like, we have to be there before it becomes a global reserve. I was almost certain it was going to happen, right? I didn't know too much about traditional finance. And so I didn't know that there was going to be things like BlackRock and ETFs and things. I really just, in my mind, it was just like governments would buy this, governments would put it in a reserve, and fiat currencies would eventually fail, and this would, replace those. And I imagine in my mind going to a grocery store in any country in the world and everything being denominated in like Satoshis, right? Like that's, yeah. I'm also kind of curious on like your guys' perspective on the adoption from BlackRock and things like that too, because I do watch your channel and I know that you guys are quite outspoken about, like thinking that maybe it's a negative thing that, people like BlackRock and stuff have gotten so involved.
if you understand like the history of central banking, I mean, it goes a long way back, but I mean, we can start at like 1913. I mean, there was a lot of fighting going on before that to keep central
Yeah.
banks out. And then they finally pushed through because they're relentless and they know how to collaborate. And they, instead of like competing against each other, they combine each other, like they combine strengths. And so that's why you've had, the Federal Reserve around
Yes.
for well over 100 years. And that was because they wanted control instead of
Yes.
competing against each other. So if it's all about control,
Yes.
I mean, Bitcoin would have to change if it's going to be a reserve currency, in my opinion, because I can't see any way that they're just going to allow Bitcoin to go if it's just run by, validators, miners, whatever. I something's going to have to change. And that's why I've been kind of like curious on what's happening with like CBDC or the CBDC's side of things, because, like USDC looks like it's, their choice potentially for a CBDC. And so if, that happens, they don't have to push through Congress a CBDC. They have USDC or something like that, a stable coin that they don't have to like manipulate the public and say, no, come on, I think a CBDC is going to be a good idea. They don't have to ever do that. They can literally just unravel it and here you go. Here's a stable coin here. And now you can track all, Doge. So Doge is going to be, what, in my opinion, because I don't trust any politician. I've been around long enough to understand that all politicians, for the most part, like high-end politicians, are liars. And so I dig in. I love researching.
Do you think Trump and Elon are politicians?
I mean, like I looked at what happened with Trump back in his prior term. And, there was a lot of different things that were horrible that he did. There was a lot of wars going on that he didn't stop. They added $6.4 trillion to the debt. They didn't get rid of the Federal Reserve.
So I want to bring it back. I want to do a little thought experiment with you, right? So we talked about, central banking and then the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve, I believe, and I think most people understand, that it's operated and ran by, the not the founding fathers, but the founding innovators of America, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, these guys, who were also a great documentary. I don't know if you've ever seen it, like a mini series on the History Channel called "The Men Who Built America." Super fascinating, really, really good. But these kind of guys, the guys who accumulated Carnegie's, exactly right, massive amounts of wealth, they set up the Fed, right? And I also believe that they're the majority, like that's who runs Vanguard as well, I think. But think about this for a second, right? Sure. So if you understand like the quote, like I care not who makes the rules, like show me, like what, how does it go? You probably know.
I care not who creates the laws. I care about creating currency or having control.
Yeah. Exactly, something like that. So if you established yourself in a power structure by creating the Federal Reserve and you control the nation's money supply and the US dollar became the global reserve, you essentially have unlimited resources and funds, right?
Sure.
Literally unlimited, like you just unlimited resources.
Yeah.
And then if you did that, like, and if you were in a position of power and control and you wanted to continue to be a dictator or power, have control, don't you think that your number one priority would be that you never lose control?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So could it be possible that these guys at the Fed, these families, had eyes everywhere, including infiltrating cypherpunks, watching what's happening, anything that possibly could disrupt their position of power by dominating and controlling the US dollar? And so then I go down this path and I speculate that and for me, it's a 50% thing, right? It's more like just a fun thought experiment. But also it could be like, is it possible that these same guys actually either invented Bitcoin or assumed control very early on, owned the first million of them from mining them, or killed Satoshi and took over, or whatever. And then
conspiracies, yeah.
and then made it feel extremely, because think about it. In the prior centuries before, when global powers shifted from different fiat currencies, from Britain and Dutch and these kind of things. And for those of you guys watching, you know, every fiat currency has a shelf life of about 100 years. It's historically been the case. If you know that, and obviously you understand that modern monetary policy is not sustainable, right? The second that they took away the gold backing, the second that they took the new money printing, like there was no way to continue this at this rate and have fiat exist forever and have US dollar dominance exist forever. So, but the difference between now and then, previous turnovers, nuclear weapons, and superpowers emerging. So no longer is it possible that the US dollar that the United States could insist at the turn of the century of the 100-year lifespan of fiat currency that people continue to use the US dollar because they've got nukes and they've got superpowers and they can allies. And we saw that start to emerge with BRICS. So your best shot at remaining in control is chess, is playing it, is 10 moves ahead of everybody else. So if you assumed somehow control of Bitcoin and you made it seem as organic as possible, resistance, people fighting back, you know, but eventually it becomes adopted. Let's see exactly the path that it's taken so far. And then it's an experiment. Maybe it's one of 10 that they've been doing to see what else might be working. And then as it starts to work, they start accumulating more and more and more and more in different wallets, anonymous, whatever. Who knows? Maybe these families control 60, 78% of the supply by now, plus the first million ever minted. So I did a video one time on this, and I thought, like, this is a really interesting thing. And you know, who is Satoshi? It could very well be the superhero that we all hope that Satoshi is, or it very well could be the alternative. And I guess the moral of the story is, either way, you better buy Bitcoin and hold it, you know, because it's coming.
If the chance that governments had created Bitcoin and have, you know, will have control over Bitcoin, because I don't think that they're ever going to, it'll never be the reserve currency if they don't have full control over that currency. So if they do, then that thing's going to go ridiculously expensive. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, it's going to be extremely expensive because they're going to, you know, everyone's going to adopt it. And so when I made that video like 2 years ago, just literally just like, I mean, that theory is as valid as any HBO's theory, everybody else, right? Like nobody knows who Satoshi is. And in my mind, logically, that possibility seems highly likely compared to everyone else speculating about some person randomly in their basement making Bitcoin, which is also very possible, or a team. Who knows? You know, now when you say controlling Bitcoin, you know, Bitcoin has a very clear like monetary and fiscal policy. We know how the governance works. We know how the inflation works, deflation. You know, so my assumption was making the assumption that these guys just control the majority of the supply. I hadn't gone so far as to think about them being able to change the mechanics of it, which I don't think. So I don't think that would really work. A lot of people have speculated that BlackRock, because of the way they wrote their policies or whatever, that if there was a fork to occur, they could choose which fork to be the real Bitcoin. I don't know if the rest of the world would cooperate, you know, and because we all, maybe not. I don't know how, I don't know. I've thought about it a while. And it gets tricky because people, you know, other countries are becoming more independent in a way. And because I didn't really finish my thought, like how I imagined that whole thing playing out with like these guys taking over Bitcoin or whatever, was eventually you'd be at some global summit where all fiat currencies are hyperinflated, everything's being wrecked, and everyone's sitting there around saying, how do we solve this problem? Is it BRICS? Is it whatever? And some guy, right? They expect this to happen. Some guy from like Ethiopia or something pops up and goes, hey, what about Bitcoin? And everyone's like, oh yeah, that would work. Like, you know, because it's apolitical. right? And that's the big problem about US dollar or other currencies. It's like it's you have to choose a side then, right? If a neutral country like Australia is going to choose a currency to use, BRICS or US dollar, they have to ally with somebody. That doesn't feel good, right? Australia wants to remain neutral. Thailand wants to remain neutral. And so I think a lot of countries would prefer to remain neutral and not choose an East or a West superpower, right? And Bitcoin is that solution. It's apolitical.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, definitely is apolitical. So going back to like how those families, were competing, the families that run the Federal Reserve, to now, like those families were global. You remember, like
Yeah, there was also,
Rothschilds, they weren't from the U.S. You have Carnegie's, Rockefellers, a bunch of different Kuhn Loeb and Company. All these giant people, these moguls, all got together from around the world. So has that changed, or is it still just a bunch of global elites just playing games with each other, claiming that it's just, oh yeah, this guy, we got to watch out for China, or we got to watch out for Russia. Meanwhile, come on, maybe they're all in on it.
Man, I have no idea, right? And I have no idea what's happening. Like, and that's why I'm so fascinated. I left the States in essentially protest. I'm like,
Did you renounce?
I haven't renounced yet.
Okay.
And I was in the process of it last year.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna lie, man. I for the first time in my life, in 40 years, I found a glimmer of hope again that the U.S. may become a good country again. Now, my thought before this Trump administration, the last one I didn't care, right? Like there was no, like, this one seems completely different for me. And what I'm interested in the most is, can we rip the deep state out of the government, right? And that, like that's the promise, right? That's the promise. Will promises be kept? I don't know, but that's always like I've always said, as long as lobbying is allowed to exist in politics, we'll never have a fair democracy, right? And everything's being controlled, by deep state. CIA has historically has had no one governing them. They just run the whole fucking country and do dark missions, whatever they want, with unlimited budgets. It's unbelievable. Like they have even if you're president, you can't even walk into Area 51. There's so much stuff that's off limits. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, what the hell is this country? Like we've completely lost control of what it was meant to be. But it was the greatest experiment that the world has ever seen. And
Sure.
So I'm fascinated.
I mean, Rome was pretty big.
Yeah,
but yeah,
Rome was big. Yeah. So I'm fascinated to see what happens, and I don't know if you saw recently Elon's interview with Joe Rogan, but he's legitimately concerned at this point for his life. I think he's gotten a lot of death threats.
I heard that.
A lot of the bureaucracy, a lot of these deep state people, a lot of these people, like, they do not want Doge doing what it's doing right now, because for generations they've been literally writing themselves checks for billions of dollars that have gone unchecked.
Sure.
And so yeah, it puts us in a weird predicament right now, right? Like you and I, we got into crypto because we believe in decentralization, global citizens, freedom.
Yeah.
And we find now that the majority of people don't really care about decentralization right now, right? They want cheap and fast. They want Solana. They want, XRP. They want whatever. And so sometimes I have these moments where I really find myself wondering, like, what am I doing? What is going on right now with this whole thing? So I'm not sure how you guys feel, but
I mean, for us, I mean, we could see the split in the road happening back, I think it was like 2016.
Yeah.
It's like we just started seeing a bit more government regulation in 2017 as well. And that's when we were like, let's get out of here. Let's get out of the US, make sure we're not part of that country anymore, because, our lives are crypto. And it's like, we care about this space, and I didn't want to be held back. And thank God I did that. I'm like really thankful for that, especially, when we're starting up companies around the world, buying real estate around the world. Like, it's really hard as a US citizen. It's impossible as a US citizen in Switzerland. So we're considering, real estate over there, and that's impossible. I literally had to bring my certificate of renouncement saying, hey, listen, I'm not a US citizen, because under my passport, it says I'm born in the US. It's really hard, man. And I think, I don't think it's going to get any easier. I really don't. But my question to you is, like, going back to the glimmer of hope is, the root cause of most of this stuff, 90% of like the problems that are happening in the US is central banking. I mean, if you go back enough, it kind of starts at central banking. So like Trump, he's going to keep Jerome Powell. And then when Jerome Powell was interviewed by some reporter, I forgot which news station, the woman's like, hey, if Trump wanted you to step down, would you do that? He's like, nope. And then the way he said it is like, Trump has no say over my career.
You're right. Everyone who has tried to challenge US dollar historically has been wiped out.
Gaddafi,
Bin Laden, everybody else in the past, JFK, So Trump's certainly trying to make he's not challenging this dollar, right? So that's if anything, they're trying to make the US dollar stronger, which gives more power to the Fed, and I guess that's maybe the deep state, if that is what it is. But I wonder though if I don't know. We can go on for hours. I don't know. I wonder how much. I think I like a lot of the control is happening. Like, the Fed is just the money side of the business that gives them the resources, but I think the CIA is really where actually they probably used all of it before. NSA, CSA, CIA, and the Fed to kind of keep control.
Of course, they're just arms of the Federal Reserve. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And also, I don't know if Trump really wants a stronger dollar, because they're begging for lower interest rates.
Yeah. No, you're right. Like, yeah.
I don't know.
He actually makes more sense to have a weaker dollar.
Yeah. And they're not going to stop printing.
No.
And so what's going to happen? Eventually, that's going to go, ballistic. I mean, we're at a hockey stick level now. We're printing $1 trillion every 90 days or less now, which is crazy. So yeah, I don't know how long that's going to last for. And probably that's where they're going to implode the US dollar, that as we know it now, which is fine. It's 53 years old now, the US dollar. And they're going to replace it with a stable coin potentially. And that's a great, movement. Hey, we got to, due to national security, we need to switch to a stable coin. That way we can control, all the spending. Like Doge wants to control see where all the spending is going. So what better way than put it on a blockchain? I mean, the writing's on the wall, man. Like, I don't trust these people. I just see like a stable coin being a CBDC, and that's it.
Yeah, you're doing some good investigative reading between the lines kind of work. It's interesting because Trump literally says, I will ban CBDCs,
He doesn't have a say. He's not the Federal Reserve.
Right. So what you think that someone like the Federal Reserve will come and like take over Circle, or
I mean, no, I don't think they have to. And here's why. You have BlackRock and Vanguard. The Federal Reserve has shares, by the way. Companies own those shares. BlackRock and Vanguard, I think it's 22% of the Federal Reserve. They own shares. 22%.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So with that said, like, who cares? Like, they own it. They own Circle, whatever.
Yeah.
They do what they want. I don't know. This is where I do my research, because the whole reason I got into Bitcoin is because I was sick of what was happening in the world. And I'm like, okay, I can't change this, but I can protect myself.
Yep.
And I thought, gold and silver was the answer until I found Bitcoin.
Mm.
And I didn't realize, till later that, okay, there's like 1,000 gold certificates to one physical gold. You know what I mean? And so, and nobody can ever prove how much gold is that get or silver is going to
No,
be out there. There's no
no,
blockchain. So
no.
that's why, like, okay, this whole thing of the Fort Knox, I'm like, okay, well, let's audit the Federal Reserve. Forget Fort Knox, man. Like, let's,
That's it,
let's,
yeah.
let's kill the final boss, man. Or
Yeah.
the final boss would be like the Bank of International Settlements, so whatever.
Yeah. So with all of this kind of stuff, right? Like if you meet someone in passing, let's say that you meet them, let's say you're at a networking event or dinner or something like that, and you meet someone new and they
Yeah.
don't know who you are, but like you for some reason you develop a connection with this person. You want to tell them something meaningful that they can walk away from this dinner, and that you have all this experience that you've learned and all these things. What do you think? Like, because from one perspective, it's like very doom and gloom, right? But if you take control and authority and sovereignty over your life, it doesn't have to be, right? You don't have to opt
Sure.
into these things. So like, what would you say to somebody who you met and really wanted to try to empower them or send them away with a really nice message?
I mean, I usually don't go this deep with people because I think most people can't handle like what is actually happening in the world right now.
Yeah.
But what I do say is like if people are just like, hey, I'm struggling, I don't really know what to do. I have a lot of surfers here come to me and like, I don't know what to do. Where do I start? I go, hey, maybe dollar cost average into Bitcoin a little bit, maybe a little bit of Monero, just in case anything happens. I really love Monero after it got kind of banned from all these exchanges. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, there's a reason for that. This is good news for Monero. So anything government hates, you kind of want to love, you know what I mean? And some ETH, and keep it simple. Unless they want to dive deeper, then you can go into some AI projects, which actually you're involved with AI, right? You're heavily involved, right?
Well, not heavily. So I've been was one of the earlier investors in like virtuals, which kind of started the whole AI
Yeah, yeah.
agent thing. Um, I've invested in as an investor. I've invested in a couple like some good AI stuff, not just in crypto, in the regular world too. And then I have built also. So about 6 months ago, before virtuals even launched or anything, I started building exactly the same thing, but not to launch tokens, but to essentially create agents that we can deploy that can be virtual KOLs or something, right? So I just built this entire like agentic dashboard that I can build personalities and have them send attention to somewhere, work as a swarm or whatever. Um, but AI is interesting too because the smartest person I've ever met in my entire life. If anyone watching this wants a really entertaining video, look on YouTube and look at Emerson Spartz, Spartz, the most optimistic YouTube video in the world. It's
Okay.
really good. This guy is he operates on a completely different level. He's like the kind of guy, he's read a book per day his entire life, basically since he's been reading. So he came to visit me in Thailand with his whole family and stuff. When I met his dad said they have a whole house in Chicago in the basement. It's just covered with books and it's all sorted by, different topics like history and math and, chemistry, and he's read everything. And he told me that he built a way to catalog and remember stuff. And it's unbelievable. He's just born differently. Smartest person I've ever met in my life. He also just some context on this is a really important part. So at the age of 13, there was also a competition who can build the best Harry Potter site. And so he found out that you could vote for yourself. And so what he did is he built a shitty Harry Potter site and he kept voting for himself, logging out, logging in, voting. Eventually he got to number 1 and he realized, oh my God, I'm at the top of the ranks. My site looks like crap. I better figure out how to build a good website. He did. He did. And I think like a year and a half later, something like that, or a year later, it sold, I believe, something like, I don't know if it's $100 million, something like that, right? And he was the beneficiary 14 years old, whatever.
Wow.
He became, Forbes have called him the king of virality. He knows how to make things like, anyway. So I caught up with him about a year ago, and his number one focus in life, because he could do anything. I have no idea how much money he has. He's probably unlimited wealth. Anyone would fund anything. That's why he wants. He's never failed at anything. He's just a super brain. And I asked him, like, when I met him the first time, I asked him, like, what are you doing now that you've achieved so much success in your life? He said, well, he's going on this thing called explore and then exploit. He's going to explore as the whole world and figure out where he needs to focus his attention to, like, essentially hit the mothership with as most impact as possible. And AI, I think, was the only conversation we had that night at the table. And he said that, remember that scene in Independence Day where, like, the mothership is flying over Washington and, like, half of the people are celebrating, half of the people are running for their lives.
Yeah.
He's like, that's where we are right now in AI. Like, the ship is right there. Like, we can see it, right? And the odds of P-doom, or the probability of doom, meaning the probability that AI wipes us out as a species, is somewhere around 20, he said 26% or something like that. That's something that we should all be extremely aware of. And that's half of the reason, that's half of the reason I want to buy a big old catamaran that's self-sufficient. And I literally want to be able to go out to the middle of the ocean and just be self-sufficient, because there's a very real chance. And of course, guys like Elon Musk, who went on Joe Rogan recently and said there's a 20% chance that things go bad. Of course, he's gonna mellow that down a lot, because he's got a lot invested in it, and he wants to be optimistic. The reality is probably much higher if Elon says 20.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man.
Not only the Fed, but we have to deal with robots. Oh boy.
Yep.
So where's the optimism here?
I know and this is why I think that this should light a fire under everyone's ass right now, because the only way that you have sovereignty and the ability to escape this kind of stuff, as, like, what's his face would call the Matrix or whatever, is, like, becoming independently wealthy, at least financially free, to be able to do these things that allow you, because it's not easy to expatriate. It costs money. You have to give half of your assets, and you have to be able to buy citizenship somewhere else. So you can't
just do it during a bear market, man.
Yeah, exactly. But if we have that much time, you got the Federal Reserve, you got the deep state, you got AI coming for you. So, like, that was, that this is also something that I think is very real, that we have to pay attention to, and we can't just go around pretending that it doesn't exist. Like, pay attention to these things. Pay attention to what's going on Bitcoin. Pay attention to what's happening in the governments. Pay attention to what's happening on a global macro perspective, and pay attention to what's happening in AI. And did you see that video recently in China where that there was an AI robot who went and tried to headbutt someone in the audience?
No.
Yeah, dude, it was, like, crazy.
Okay. I'll check that out.
It's great. Yeah, just on YouTube, like, AI robot China attack somebody or whatever. It's nuts.
Wow. So that wasn't even planned. That was just
it was going rogue. The security had to come kill switch it. Yeah.
Jeez. Well, somebody must have been fired. The guy that programmed that thing.
Yeah.
Wow. That must suck.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. Well, Kyle, thank you, man. I want you to any last thoughts on what we've talked about? Where can they find you?
Yeah, no, it's just nice to have conversations like these, because there's, it's rare to be able to speak to people who, like, genuinely care and have been around for a long time. And so thank you for having me on. I appreciate that. And so I make daily YouTube videos Monday through Friday, and I'm really just trying to keep people informed on these kind of things that we're talking about, so that they can be aware of what's going on. And I want to help people get to a position where they have the freedom to choose, right? The freedom for choice. So I make daily YouTube videos, so they can find me on YouTube. I'll give you guys the links, put in the description. Sure. Also on X, just at Kyle_Chasse.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Toby.